I thought it was not his finest hour. In fact, I think the whole thing is kind of boring and dull. What do you think?
Oh, there's no question it's boring and dull. Did Chuck actually say it wasn't boring and dull? I mean,
Yeah,
like,
he like look. Michelle Obama was pretty good. I thought Kamala Harris had some moments, but I did not think President Obama did very well at all.
well, I think you've been right. The format almost, predestines it to be boring and dull. Well, look, the issue what the Democrats are trying to do, and it's smart politics, is people are feeling bad now because of the effects of the pandemic. So what they want people to do is just to focus on how they're feeling right now because Trump is the incumbent. It's smart politics. And so what it says the Republicans need to do, and this is really what I'm waiting for. Number one, they need to do what you did in terms you've suggested in terms of the format. Okay. Make it something people want to watch. Number
Yep,
two, talk about Trump's record. Talk
yep.
about what he achieved. If that's what the election is about, Trump is going to win. I mean,
You
before
know,
the pandemic, we had 2 years in a row. I mean, like 24 months in a row, where there were more job openings than there were people unemployed.
and we
If
have a recovery. I just read the housing stats, Bloomberg story this morning. Housing is exploding. Every housing job creates four jobs downstream. We're going to have, according to the Atlanta Fed, up to 24% GDP pop in the third quarter. It's a weird year. Newt Gingrich, interestingly enough, has a new book out, which is the most comprehensive defense of the Trump record, which I read over the last 2 days. It's pretty astonishing what has been accomplished in 3 years. They've got to make it happen. They got to make people happy again.
we've got to talk about it. The fact that you are astonished reading it as clued in as you are says we haven't been talking about it enough. And this, I really think the president's got to be more disciplined on social media. I mean, I get it, I understand all of that. Look, here's another thing. Trump's the first president since Reagan who hasn't started a war.
Oh, interesting. Now, I suggested off
I
the
mean,
cuff to Ron and McDaniel yesterday. You go get Martha McSally, Tom Cotton, Mike Gallagher, and Dan Crenshaw. There you've got the Air Force, the Army, the Marine Corps, and the Navy. You put them in a room and you have Donald Trump talk about rebuilding the military. And it's a conversation because I just don't think it's watchable. And the Republicans, if they line up people who are running for Congress in the 3rd District of California, it's going to be awful. I mean, just going to be awful.
well, I agree. And you know what they ought to talk about in that conversation is the fact that we operated under the defense sequester for 5 years or 4 years, I believe it was, even though everybody in both parties said it was a complete disaster. I mean,
Yes.
and Jim Mattis says it's done more damage to America's armed forces than any enemy ever in the field. And the Washington establishment left it in place for 4 years, and Donald Trump got it reversed. See, if we start talking about things like this, I think the president's going to do very well. But if we don't, and all people are thinking about in November is, gee, I haven't liked the last 6 months. No, I haven't liked it either. Have you liked it?
No,
No,
no, I,
because of the pandemic.
yeah,
So, and we need a pro growth president coming out of this pandemic. We do not need the Green New Deal and huge new spending on new programs that haven't worked and taxes that are not used to pay down the deficit. And that's what we're going to get with Joe Biden. I mean, to me, the message is pretty clear.
that is clear. We need a pro growth president. We've got to grow, and we are going to grow, and he's got to talk that up. I played AOC's speech 3 times yesterday, Jim, the entire speech 3 times, because I think she is the motivating, driving force of the Democrats in the House. Newt focuses on her as well. What do you think about running against the radical left as opposed to against Uncle Joe?
Well, yeah, I think that needs to be part of the message. But I'll just repeat what I'm saying. This is an incumbent president running for reelection, and he has an outstanding record. The pandemic has made it more difficult to talk about because that's what's at the front of a lot of people's minds. He needs to talk about his record and what he's done. I mean, that's how you run as an incumbent, and also about what he wants to do going forward. We haven't even talked about China. Mike Pompeo made a really good point, which
Yes.
is he hasn't heard anything about China at this convention, and I'm concerned. Remember, Joe Biden's time in Washington, his 40 years, during that entire time, the United States was facilitating the rise of China. Now, I don't blame Joe for that. That was the establishment view. But my concern is that we're not going to be able to teach that old dog a new trick, and he's going to go back to that.
Yeah.
And that would be an utter disaster.
That was, I
So
will
the,
play that next hour. Mike Pompeo made a point. It has not been in any of the speeches. They don't want to talk about China.
right. And now, maybe that's just politics, which wouldn't be so bad, but maybe Joe was really mired in 1990 and he thinks, well, all we have to do is engage China and they'll become a responsible actor. Now, nobody currently in Washington on either side of the aisle, I can assure you, believes that. But we may, if we're not careful, we may elect the one guy left who does. And I've
That's
been
well
concerned
put.
about
That's well put. Jim Talent, as always.